What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This is a space where I share music that has affected me on a deep level and attempt to explain why it has the impact on me that it does. In this video, I want to talk about an album that I've been listening to for many years now, but that never ceases to intrigue and compel me every single time I put it on, in unique ways that aren't instantly easy to identify. For me, it has seemingly unending replay value, and the key to that could lie in the indirect ways it expresses the intense emotions that it contains, as well as in its hooky songs and deep introspection. It's a record that's just as densely shrouded in melancholy beauty as the spectral forestry depicted on its cover. It's been a source of comfort and liberation for me over the years, so I'm excited to talk about it. That record is, of course, R.E.M's enigmatic 1983 debut record, Murmur. Most people have heard of R.E.M. because of the massive commercial success they achieved in the early to mid-90s, beginning at the moment their single Losing My Religion and its striking music video hit the airwaves in 1991. The song would be a multi-platinum smash, and its accompanying album Out of Time, as well as the highly praised follow-up Automatic for the People, would establish R.E.M. as one of the biggest bands in the world and a progenitor of the paradigm shift in rock music that was occurring near the beginning of the decade. Less people are aware, however, that Out of Time was actually their 7th studio album, and that up to that point they had been a prolific and dominating force in the underground, with an incredible string of releases throughout the 80s. Each one of those records could have a video of its own. They're all unique and brilliant in their own way. They all fit into a genre called post-punk, and if you don't know what that is, it just refers to bands who were inspired by the eclectic and textural approach to punk music, which artists like The Clash and Joy Division were experimenting with around the end of the 70s. This genre would eventually grow legs and evolve into what we all currently know as alternative music. But the most moving and mesmerizing of these early R.E.M. studio releases was without question their first. It's one of the most mystifying debuts in music history. Pretty bizarre way to introduce yourself as a band, but one that I think has a far greater lasting effect on the listener than a more straightforward approach would have had. I see it as symbolic that R.E.M. chose to represent this record with a photograph of kudzu, an invasive weed prevalent throughout Georgia where the band is from, as well as throughout the greater American South. Kudzu is known to spread over long distances, cover over large numbers of plants and trees, and suffocate them by obscuring their access to the sun. Likewise, there is a murkiness and a strange obscurity to much of the music on this project, as well as a sense of being covered over and encapsulated that many of these songs can give you. But rather than feeling suffocated, the bright attributes of the music act like a cushion, softening the effects of a darkness which is being recognized by the more intensely brooding and weary elements. It's as though the album has an awareness of some harsh reality that it knows exists but doesn't fully acknowledge. Even the most upbeat tracks have an air of melancholy, most of which is communicated through the repressed yearning of lead singer Michael Stipe, who has what a friend of mine once described as a wet rasp to his voice, with which he draws from what seems to be a bottomless well of sorrow. The band itself, then, works to juxtapose his gloom with energized performances that can border on joyous, providing radiant, melodically rich counterpoint to the overtones of deep sadness. The results of this confliction are songs that feel emotionally layered to a very high degree, so much so that it often grips you long before you take into account anything that Michael Stipe is actually saying in the lyrics. It seems like this album begins at an emotional height that many records fail to reach at all, with all that urgency being conveyed in a different and interesting way on each song. In this video, I'll try to explain what makes each of the songs on this project unique and impactful to me, detailing the substantial elements which contribute to their overall effect. The record starts off with the song Radio Free Europe. It was the lead single from the project, and it's not hard to see why, as it's one of the most straightforward and instantly catchy songs on the tracklist. The song introduces the bright arpeggiated guitars and melodic bass lines that would become staples of R.E.M's sound, with the bass taking a prominent role while the guitar sort of paints over it with unraveling chords. The bass on this track is pretty busy, especially in the pre-chorus where it runs up and down the major scale while the guitar picks and spirals overhead. The guitars take a backseat throughout, doubling the bass and adding in jangly brushstroked accents to complement the melody, as the drums all the while punch out a danceable 4/4 beat underneath. It's a very dynamic song, and it sets the stage by introducing the basic instrumental formula of the record. Michael Stipe's vocals are about as peppy as they're gonna get on what is essentially this album's radio song. However, he can't help but allow a bit of his melancholia to bleed through noticeably in his demeanor. Already there are hints of a strange bleakness in the echoed calls that drape the background of the chorus, although it'd be hard to realize their connotation without having any knowledge of what's to come later. Something you realize pretty soon, though, is that the lyrics in the song are difficult to make out, and that's because this track, as well as a couple others on the record, have purposefully ambiguous lyrics. Stipe stated in an interview with NME that while many of the songs on the record do have a defined meaning, Radio Free Europe is one of the exceptions. The title is loosely based on the US government-funded radio station Radio Free Europe, which broadcasts westernized news to the Middle East and Asia. However, bassist Mike Mills has confirmed that the lyrics are mostly unrelated to this concept. However, this shouldn't lead you to believe that there isn't thought behind what's being said on this project, because the lyrics on Murmur are very often fractured allusions which add to the mood and overall effect of the content a considerable amount. They represent the disorganized but perceptive mind of their creator, as well as his complicated emotional state, rather than a person spouting gibberish for the sake of gibberish. In addition, the solid and extremely memorable songwriting that R.E.M employs doesn't allow much enjoyment to be lost on account of puzzling lyrics. However, I will say that the other songs with very cryptic lyrics on this project contain more ideas that I can read into and derive meaning from, whereas I think this song is meant to be less interesting topically and more of a catchy bop you can just throw on without feeling like you have to know what's being said. Overall, it's a great song. A calm before the storm in a sense, however, it's not the first I go to if I'm looking for the complicated catharsis that much of the rest of this album instantly delivers. Pilgrimage is the first time we're introduced to the conflicted, mysterious tone of Murmur. After far-off calls from Michael that sound like they're coming from a cave, we're met with an inquisitive and open-ended bass line layered together with low piano keys, and then layered again with the guitar and bells when the vocals come in. Along with this comes a 4-on-the-floor kick pattern that could be a subdued dance beat if the rest of the instrumentation wasn't so uncanny. The large amount of empty space left in the mix supports the feeling of being in limbo, as Michael relays burdened lyrics which I interpret as expressions of being trapped in a damaging or unprofitable life situation and needing to liberate oneself from it. Rest assured this will not last, take a turn for the worst, in the verse details the cycle which he is involved in, and he describes his hatred of it as clipped and distant, which I think is excellent writing. Clipped and distant is just about the best description of a victim's withdrawn state of mind that I've heard. In the pre-chorus, a more recognizable lead guitar relieves the tension, and the instruments build into the chorus in unison, as Michael sings the line, "Pilgrimage has gained momentum." The chorus and the bridge then feel like an expression of the freedom that the pilgrim is experiencing or wants to experience, with the instrumentation being a lot brighter, more straightforward, and more invigorating, and the lyrics reading, "Take a turn, take a fortune." Of course, this interpretation is just my opinion, as there are certainly other lines which I don't know what to make of, and I'm sure it could all be interpreted in multiple ways. The resonance of the layered instruments and the disembodied vocal harmonies in the chorus, along with the ghostly choral vocals in the bridge, all assist in giving this track its strange aura. It introduces the shrouded and obscure nature of Murmur in a stark fashion, and overall it's one of the most intriguing songs to me on the record, one that definitely takes a few listens to fully digest. It's extremely interesting to me how R.E.M creates such a unique sound here using pretty bare-bones instrumentation and a few effects. Laughing is, in my opinion, the first of the absolute gems from this record. This song is like a warm blanket enveloping you, a prime example of the encapsulating effect I was talking about in the overview, as it seems to cushion the listener from some faceless darkness or despair. It evokes the feeling of being in a candlelit room at night, but despite the relative peace and comfort you feel in this space, you can look outside your window and see that rain is pouring, wind is howling, and a thunderstorm is raging. The fact that Michael doesn't define this source of unrest makes it all the more foreboding, but it can be perceived in the weariness of his voice and in the vague references to it in the lyrics. His vocals on this song feel like a sigh. The rest of the band works to essentially comfort him in his distress, sounding soft and warm while he appears more pained in his demeanor than he had previously revealed himself to be. The light, airy acoustic guitars throughout contrast the heavy soul and wavering of the vocals, and the buoyant bass and drums underneath have an energy which propels the song along without allowing it to collapse under its own weight. The lyrics don't function as a narrative to me, but instead as broken pieces of ideas which support the overarching mood and concept, that once again being the need to escape a distressing life situation. The Greek myth of Laocoon and his two sons is referenced, illustrated most notably in the famous sculpture which British classicist Nigel Spivey of the University of Cambridge calls the prototypical icon of human agony in Western art. A bit melodramatic, although strangely enough, in the song the story is referred to as Laocoon and her two sons, which is interesting. Seeing himself as a woman and writing from that perspective is a technique that Michael Stipe has been known to make use of, so that could be influencing his approach here, but I'm not sure. In addition, the verse "lock the doors, latch the room," which precedes the chorus "lighted, laughing in tune," indicates to me that the speaker is looking for solace in the midst of his turmoil, and joins together with the building power of the instrumentation as if he is finding a kind of relief in this action. It very much feels to me like all of this deliberation is taking place inside his mind, like he's shaping an inner universe in order to combat a difficult reality that he's dealing with, which only enhances the feelings of encapsulation as though you're being buried and lost in translation along with his thoughts. I'm in love with the enshrouding feeling that this album has, and this track is easily one of the best examples of it. This song doesn't necessarily want to be known, but that doesn't mean it feels exclusive, as it allows the listener to participate in the escape and take refuge along with it. Without a doubt, this is one of my favorites on the whole record, and a song I consistently come back to when I'm in need of a euphoric, momentary sense of release. Another unquestionable gem from Murmur is the next song, Talk About the Passion. It's far less murky than many of the other tracks, and the lyrics are less cryptic and more digestible, which is likely why it was chosen as the second single from the project. The song stands out as one where the bass yields to the guitar playing, which is uncommon for the record as they're both usually vying for control. It starts out with an instantly memorable arpeggiated guitar line, which is being doubled by, I think, a banjo, which plays for a few bars before continuing into the verse and ushering in the other band members. The vocals come in with the line, empty prayer, empty mouths, Combian reaction. Empty prayer, empty mouths, talk about the passion. And then afterward, not everyone can carry the weight of the world. After this is the chorus, which has a beautiful plucked guitar part and background vocals that soar over the mix, as Michael sings the title phrase, talk about the passion. The rest of the song is the same idea with repeated phrases and lyrics, with a few change-ups in the bridge and added pre-choruses after the second and third verse, which contain the lyric combien de temps, French for how long. The meaning of the song to me lies in what the passion here represents, which is the gravity of the world that many speak about but don't allow themselves to be fully exposed to. Michael makes it clear that many of those who talk about the passion are speaking with empty mouths, or with a partial awareness of what it means, but maybe not a true experience of what it entails. It would be very easy for me to talk about starving children in a third world country while being completely disconnected emotionally from what I'm actually talking about. He then states that not everyone can carry the weight of the world, which I believe is the reason for his previous statement. Not all those who talk about the passion carry the weight of the world. It's much easier to avoid the gravity of life, to avoid allowing ourselves to feel the desperation of those in peril, or to completely crowd our lives with distractions that can numb us to the scary and overwhelming knowledge of our existence. The people who approach the world from a very honest and unfiltered perspective carry a heavy weight on their shoulders and expose themselves to the terror of knowing what this world means, but attain a deeper understanding of the human condition. Through this awareness, they also attain a heart for those around them who all share in carrying the same weight that they do, whether those people choose to address it or not. To me, the song is about the human condition and the ways in which we handle the immense responsibility of consciousness. It's a lyrical high-water mark for this album, and it succeeds in fleshing out an incredibly deep concept in the span of only a few sentences. Part of the reason that Michael Stipe is so easy to connect with, despite being so indirect on this record, has to do with the fact that he's just simply an honest, good human being who refuses to compromise himself or be false, and those qualities show through on this track more than any other. The next track, Moral Kiosk, is a break from the heavy subject matter and confounding strangeness of the previous string of songs. It's a relatively straightforward dancey cut with some interesting aspects to it. The lyrics to this one are interesting. I've never fully understood what they mean, but my mind has always drifted toward politics and the lens through which we view figures in that arena. The moral kiosk in this case could refer to the way the actions of these people are presented and portrayed in the media versus the actual goings-on behind the scenes that we aren't made aware of, or the scandals being scratched in the twilight. These people are the ones to which idle hands are oriented and who dash a roving eye by taking steps to remove suspicion of their activities. However, there are many other lyrics in the song which are difficult to pin down, and this may well be another case on the record where lyrical choices are being made ambiguously. There's also some interesting instrumentation being utilized. The sus chord that starts the track off is used as the bass for the chorus, because it's a complex chord that can be accented by a lot of interesting harmonies. They build on it and wrap it with a lot of vocal layering, which is a technique R.E.M. have continuously made use of on numerous songs throughout their career, and is a defining aspect of their sound. The guitar layering in the verse is cool too. I like how the refrain sort of swerves around the rhythm guitar in the mix, and the whip crack clap that the drums are using adds a lot of energy to the rhythm section. I don't have too much to say about this song though. It is pretty straightforward, and I appreciate its placement on the album as a breather after some of the heftier tracks. The flow of this album is fantastic. It never leaves you hanging too long in a single mood, but provides a lot of variation on the very cohesive musical ideas being presented, so that you never feel like you're circling back to the same place you've already been. The most alluring, transcendental moment on Murmur comes in the form of the next song, Perfect Circle. One of the standouts without question, this song is hypnotizing, it's trance-inducing. It's short and simple, but so highly effective at what it accomplishes. Throughout the song, pianos dance and weave together with a serpentine bass line over 3 verses and choruses, while minimal guitar passages shimmer off in the distance. The drums are played and mixed so delicately that they seem to dissipate when they're struck. All of the instruments have a distance and a wispiness so that the song sounds like it's being whispered into your psyche. The vocals are still melancholy, but nonetheless have a quiet peace about them. This song feels like it could be taking place in the same lighted room as in Laughing, as a manifestation of the tranquility that Michael was searching for on that track. It may be the best example of the encapsulation effect of Murmur. Nowhere else on the record does the atmosphere feel more clouded and warm than on this song. The lyrics are once again opaque, and to each member of the band, the song bears unique significance. Michael Stipe has stated that the song to him is about an ex-girlfriend, while guitarist Peter Buck says that the song captures a feeling he got one night when the band was staying in New Jersey, and he saw a group of kids playing touch football from his motel room door. Bassist Mike Mills reportedly wanted to create the feeling of being in a strange hotel room at night, and hearing the sound of a train chugging far off in the distance. And interestingly enough, though I couldn't find any info on his feelings about the song, drummer Bill Berry was actually the one who wrote it. Whether or not the song has any true context is up for debate, but the answer to that is somewhat irrelevant, as its power lies in its incredibly evocative and enthralling mood, rather than in any specific lyrical meaning. Without a doubt, this is the most otherworldly piece on an already oblique album, and its brief runtime is one of the most captivating experiences that Murmur has to offer. The next track is called Catapult, and in every respect it lives up to the name. It's a propulsive, bouncy cut that doesn't bog itself down with too much depressive weight, but still brings across a sense of melancholy that Michael Stipe seems to be incapable of holding in on these songs, once again creating the layered, emotionally potent atmosphere that is so prevalent on this album. His writing is ambiguous once again, with some of the strangest lines on the whole project appearing on this song. But like on Radio Free Europe, the melody writing is so strong and the song flows so well that this hardly takes away from the listening experience. And as I previously stated, Michael Stipe's voice is so drenched in utter feeling that it isn't hard to sympathize with him or understand the emotional state he's in, regardless of what he's actually saying at that moment. I love the flow of this song. The verses have a subtle, tense energy to them. The pre-choruses channel the tension with building instrumentation, and then the choruses are like an explosive release of that tension. Some of my favorite guitar lines on the whole project are here, especially the chorus and refrain that comes in on the second verse, which gets stuck in my head all the time. The way the guitars are being jabbed at rather than strummed creates a springy effect in how they sound as well, which adds to the aesthetic. It's essentially another dance punk bop, albeit with some dynamics that make it a little more unusual than the other quote-unquote straightforward tracks. The clinch and release technique that the band employs sets it apart, and Michael Stipe's vocals are also moodier here than on the other punkier tracks, which gives the song more weight to throw around. These songs are all emotionally complex to the point that they never leave you with just one feeling, but instead evoke multiple feelings which tie together into this beautiful harmony and create a much more interesting, multi-dimensional experience. The most potent experiences we have are often difficult to put into any one category. They encompass a broad range of emotions, rather than just influencing only one piece of ourselves, and the songs on Murmur capture that complex effect effortlessly. The next 4 tracks are, in my opinion, the best on the entire record. Each one of these tracks is near perfect in my mind, and I come back to them all the time. They are all completely one of a kind in their own separate ways. The first of these is Sitting Still, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the best punk song on Murmur. It has the most vital energy of any song on the record. It paints the picture in my mind of a silent and apprehensive person speaking out, taking his power back by any means necessary from an oppressive and confining force. Something to note is that in the early years of R.E.M's career, Michael Stipe was extremely timid. He had what he described as immense insecurities over his lack of articulation, dreading interviews and often having other members of the band show up for him in his stead. It's very obvious that he was using this record and others as an opportunity to battle his inner fears, and nowhere is this better exemplified than on Sitting Still. It's in essence about his fight with his debilitating anxiety. Every time Michael speaks up on this song, it feels more and more like liberation, and I absolutely love it. After a short intro of descending chords to set up the song, the verse comes in, which is subdued and restrained, gathering momentum with Michael's dejected mumbling underneath. When the pre-chorus comes in, the song opens up and he raises his voice, as if he's trying to be heard. The palm-muted guitar chugging in this section does a great job of mirroring the bottled-up tension, and I love Michael's mad rambling here. He sounds like a lunatic. This part intensifies each time it appears, and it so perfectly captures the feeling of having something you desperately need to communicate, but being suffocated and unable to express it until you finally collapse under the pressure. It is exhilarating. After these two sections repeat, we get the chorus, which has the same descending chord progression as the intro, and the lyric, I can hear, I can hear, I can hear, can you hear me? The way the song builds throughout heightens the sensation of this being an explosion of pent-up need, and the more and more vocal layering being added while Michael sings ever more desperately makes the song seem like such an earnest expression of powerlessness and rage. This song has special significance to me because I latched onto it during an especially trying time in my life. I was experiencing a psychosis which culminated in a 2-week-long stay at a mental hospital. I was disassociated from myself to the point that basic mechanisms I utilized every day in my behavior felt foreign to me. I essentially forgot what it meant to be human. I would look at myself in the mirror and not know what I was looking at. It was extremely terrifying, and naturally it crippled me socially, and I felt extremely angry over how certain people treated me while I was in this state. I was harboring deep rage and fear as I was unable to communicate my needs to the world, and so I used this song and album in general as an outlet for all the feelings related to those things. It got me while I was in that place, unable to talk and overwhelmed by my own wide-eyed introspection, trapped inside myself, ready to burst. I highly recommend this song if you relate to those feelings, but even if you aren't on the verge of a mental breakdown, this is still a killer track, one of the classic post-punk songs from this period in my eyes. 9-9 is the 9th song on this record, and it's one of the most bizarre and exciting outings on the entire project. I have no idea where they pulled this song from. It's so peculiar, but somehow its flow is so logical at the same time. A short bass intro throws you into a web of guitar arpeggios, anticipating drum strikes and hushed muttering which translates to this, all of which is absolutely disorienting. After 4 measures of that, the instruments collect themselves, with the guitar flying into this inventive style of playing that uses noise and muted strumming. These verse passages might be my favorite guitar parts on the album. They're so in the pocket with the drum groove, and they feel so intuitive and energized. The chorus snaps together into a bit more recognizable cadence as the guitar plays 8th note arpeggios of the root chord. The bass here drags a quarter note behind in tempo in order to emphasize accents of the drums, which creates a shifting landscape on the low end. The bridge transitions you back into the labyrinth of dizzying guitar and pounding drums, except now everything is soaked in reverb, which makes the effect even more jarring. The verse and chorus repeat and the song ends, leaving you completely confused about what just happened. Everything about this song feels so shrouded in obscurity, and the lyrics are no different. They mirror the frenzied energy of the music with allusions to mental distress, which in my opinion illustrate the cluttered mind of a person who suffers from social anxiety and receives reproval for the manner in which he presents himself. The verse lyrics, got the punch right on target, reflects the person's difficulty in connecting with others and the things he's saying, and this idea is supported by the next line, twisting tongues. The stripes on his back then might be a reference to the backlash he receives from his peers on account of his clumsiness. The chorus details the ways in which he handles the negative feedback he receives, and the song's bridge contains crazed internalized confusion as the person frantically stresses over why he is the way he is. This is another song I connected to while I was locked inside a similar state of mind. I've always paired it with Sitting Still, and I appreciate how they're seated next to each other on the record, because they both express similar feelings surrounding the lack of an ability to connect with the world and the fear of the judgment of others. The fact that R.E.M. were able to craft something that sounds so foreign with the most basic rock instrumentation on this song is impressive. One of the strangest and most exhilarating tracks on the album, hands down. Shaking Through is the crown jewel of Murmur. It would make the list of my favorite songs, not just on this album, but in general. I love every single second of this track. There's never a moment when I couldn't throw this song on and be instantly uplifted. Every element is brimming with passion throughout, from the glistening dancing pianos that are beautiful, to the pent-up excitement of the drums, to the blinding brightness of the guitars, to the vast melancholy present in Michael Stipe's achingly gorgeous vocal performance. His voice is so soaked in sorrow and raw feeling on this track. He brings the crushing weight of his burdens and just wrings out every drop. Joy and longing are both present in this song to their highest degrees. The melody is amazing, particularly the pre-chorus in my opinion, which has an awesome vocal hook in addition to these low piano keys that bleed together with the building instrumentation, which is ushering the song into the chorus. It gives me goosebumps every single time I hear it. It's the piano that really pushes this song to another level, but each instrument brings something to the table and meanders along its own path to make the song feel like a jam session from heaven. And just when you think they're done, as if the track couldn't get any more euphoric, they kick the song up into another key for a few bars at the end, just to squeeze every last ounce of feeling out of it. Lyrically, the song is simple and beautiful. illustrating the moment of a repressed person speaking out, the one who doesn't count in the room, whose voice is shaking through and denying all the way. The disarming vulnerability of the subject matter, along with the elegance of the song's melodies and vocal performance, give this track an emotional power on the level of, like, a Sufjan Stevens song. Everything about it is excellent. It is legitimately one of my favorite songs ever, and the highest emotional peak this album reaches, in my opinion. If you're looking for a song to sell this album to you, or even to get you into R.E.M in general, I highly recommend this one. We Walk is another venture into the mysterious, shrouded tone of Murmur, and it's one of the most enigmatic cuts on the project, one that I remember standing out to me instantly when I discovered this record, for a number of reasons. It has a sing-songy triplet flow to it reminiscent of a nursery rhyme or a jingle, except instead of being candid, it's murky and evocative and draped in the emotional confliction and shadowy vagueness that are always present in some capacity throughout the entirety of this record. The feeling of encapsulation is again very prominent here, but I would say that in this song above all the others, the darkness lurking on the other side of the capsule feels the most ominous. The guitars are jaunty, the drums skip, and the vocals are relatively upbeat, but the large amount of empty space left in the mix is used to imply the existence of a dreary expanse that lies beyond the space in which they're playing. This notion is brought to life by the reverberating crashes that can be heard throughout the song far off in the distance, which sound like thunder rolls or rocks falling deep in a mine shaft. Michael's foreboding lyrics add to the uneasiness, with historical references to the murder of French revolutionary Jean-Paul Marat in his bathtub, along with the vaguely existential chorus refrain, "We walk through the wood," which changes to "We walk through the world" the third time around. Also, the phrase "take Oasis" repeated throughout begs the question of what the narrator's taking Oasis from. The overly upbeat instrumentation paired with the unnerving production choices and lyrics make this track feel off, comforting in its close surroundings but hinting at an evil that lurks just around the corner. I absolutely love the cognitive dissonance this track creates, and it easily brings to mind vivid imagery with clever sound design, making it one of the most evocative tracks on the whole LP. The last song on the album is called West of the Fields. It finishes things off in a similar way to how they started, with an energized post-punk track, highlighting all of the elements of the R.E.M sound to great effect. The extra helping of reverb on the instruments here give the track more of an epic feel though, rather than the carefree and joyful vibes of Radio Free Europe. Grandiose guitar stabs, a bouncy bass line, and massive drum sound all contribute to the condensed energy of the track, and Michael's sterner tone has an intensity which feels very climactic. The song utilizes a call and response theme on the chorus, which adds more distance as the far-off voice of Mike Mills answers Michael's calls of "long gone." The bridge is my favorite part. An organ is added to the mix which increases the momentum of the epic theme even more. An acoustic guitar is added with accents on the upbeats, heightening the tension. And the band once again utilizes their staple of ethereal layered vocals to provide rich harmonies to the main melody. This song is very much about texture and flow, and the vocals are treated like another texture, another instrument adding nuance to the overall sound, rather than adding any specific lyrical meaning. Its basic structure and themes are similar to prior tracks, but it's all articulated in a completely different way, drawing attention once again to the large amount of cohesion yet also variation on this record. It's an effective closer, and I like the fact that the band didn't do a slow song or buy into any cliches while they were deciding how to finish off the album. With Murmur, R.E.M made a record of uncompromising honesty and perpetual beauty. It's an album that understands those who have trouble being understood, and offers a place to writhe and hide and collect oneself in the middle of a desolate season of life. It not only commiserates, but also finds warmth and beauty in the darkness, carving for itself its own space for processing and rejuvenation if the world doesn't offer one. It chooses not to wallow in its own self-pity, but rather recognizes its dim surroundings and seeks to find truth and peace in the midst of them. This is an uplifting and powerful piece of art, deep and riddled with fulfilling introspection, a work that offers a wellspring of valuable insight to those who are willing to pull back its veil and look. If you have your own thoughts on this album, make sure to leave those down in the comments. I'd love to hear how this record has affected you, if indeed it has. I'm in the ether. Thanks for watching.